Barely fits in the back of a Prius. I think we'll still be able to get it in with the roof on, but it's going to be a tight squeeze. So by my calculations, the Dodger should fit in the back of my parents' Prius, even with the roof on. And it's much easier to put the roof on here on land than it is on the boat. So I have the roof cut out and attached to the rest of the structure using clamps. Right now I'm marking where it meets the front and sides in the arch of the Dodger so that I'll know where to drill the holes for the wood screws, which I'll use to attach it. So now we just got to screw and glue this thing on. And that completes the construction phase, except of course for actually bolting it onto the boat. This 3/8 should be good and sturdy. It was just a little bit of effort to bend it, but the bend is fairly gentle. So now that I have the roof attached, I slathered West epoxy on the entire thing, and also some fairing compound around where the joins are. And right now I'm putting pre-coat, which is a 1-part primer on, so it's a real thick paint. And that'll also help to fair and smooth the surface in preparation for painting. So for everything but the top of the roof, I'm going to give it 3 coats of my favorite paint, Bright Side Polyurethane. And I'm going to use Hatteras Off-White, which is a little easier on the eyes than standard white. For the top of the roof, I'm going to use Interdeck Sand Beige, which is a non-skid paint. Not because I plan on walking on the roof, but just to match the color of the non-skid pads on the deck. Well, I did manage to get the Dodger into the back of the Prius and transport it to the boatyard here in Basin Cove. But the clown car routine is not yet over, as I have to now get it into the dinghy, row the dinghy out to the boat, and then get it out of the dinghy and onto the boat without scratching up any fresh paint or losing it overboard. At least it's wood, so it will float in that case. Looks like the better strategy is to get into the dinghy and lift it off of the dock. So far, so good. This is one reason why I chose the very well-sheltered Basin Cove to tackle this project. Trying to row out against any kind of wind and a chop with the Dodger precariously perched in the stern like that may not have turned out so well. So the last hurdle, which is to lift it up onto the boat without scratching any paint. So just get it lined up, slide it forward. Boom. I reckon. So of course the Dodger is going to require some window panes. For that I will use pre-cut rectangular sheets of 1/4-inch acrylic. Although I will have to drill some holes for the self-tapping screws, which will fasten it from the inside. Then I have to drill the holes into the plywood to take the screws. And be careful you don't drill all the way through. It's not a disaster if you do, but it won't look very nice. Well, I didn't drill all the holes to take the self-tapping screws, and that's going to come back to haunt me. I'm kind of jumping the gun here and going to put the sealant on, and I have about half of the screw holes all the way drilled, so that'll hold it in place while I drill the rest of the holes. That's in theory anyway. The oversight will come apparent when I take the tape and the plastic covering off, and I'll see the result of drilling the holes after applying sealant. And essentially what happens there is that the wood shavings from the drill are now lodged in the sealant, and the panes are perfectly clear so you can see it. So, again, not a disaster, just a little unsightly. So, we won't make that mistake again with the next two panes. This is sort of a roundabout way of answering the question I sometimes get, which is, where did you learn how to do all this work? And the answer is by doing all this work. And of course, you know, the projects are constantly varying on a boat. You have to be a jack of all trades. And so there's always a learning curve here. So I'm still having to apply some silicone sealant from the outside, laying down tape on the panes, because I'm not adding enough silicone on the inside to squeeze it out. I'll finally get it right on the third pane. Get the right amount of sealant on and get it close enough to the edge so it'll squeeze out and cover the entire area where the window pane is against the plywood. And therefore I don't have to apply any from the outside. I can just pull the tape and plastic off and voila! Looks pretty nice. So now the Dodger has to be attached to the boat. And I'm going to attach the aft end of the Dodger using a cleat, which is just that rectangular piece of timber you see there. And that'll be attached to the cabin top using two long 1/4-20 bolts that go down through the cabin top. And then we'll attach to the Dodger with two big number 14 wood screws. So the wood screws are going at 90 degrees to the bolts. Now the forward end of the Dodger I'm going to attach to the boom gallows using U-bolts. So I just got the holes drilled there, testing for fit. And that U-bolt will bolt from the inside of the Dodger. Of course, I'm going to need a piece of compression timber there. Otherwise, if I crank down on the nuts on the U-bolt from the inside, it's just going to explode the Dodger. So I'm reckoning 2 sets of attachment points on both sides of the Dodger will be strong enough to withstand the force of waves crashing over the boat. Looks sturdy anyway. Boom. So I've got all the bolt holes drilled, but before I actually put the bolts in, I need to lay down some silicone rubber sealant. And first I'm going to lay down some masking tape to try to keep it nice and tidy. Underline on the word try. The idea here is to have the Dodger sitting on a layer of silicone rubber. So it's basically sitting on a big gasket, which will, one, make it watertight, which is not super important here, because if you get some leaks around the base there, it's still just going to drain off into the cockpit. But it'll also allow me to tighten the bolts against that rubber gasket, and so we'll make it nice and snug. At least that's the hope here. Okay, so this is just the initial crank down on the nuts there. And now we'll spread the sealant here on the outside and pull the tape up. Let's see how we did here in this hot sun. This stuff dried a lot faster than I thought it would. So it's a little rough, but not too bad. And then what I'll do is, once this dries a little more, is I'll tighten those bolts down. So you got kind of a rubber gasket, and then you clamp it down on the gasket. That's on there good now. Now we put the icing on the cake, which is to mount the ship's bell. I had to think about where exactly I was going to put the bell, as it used to be underneath the boom gallows, but that's not possible anymore. So I think it'll work on just the aft end of one side, but I won't know that until I actually get sailing again.